Welcome to RPG Blokes, the podcast where we take the mystery out of role-playing games and show just how much fun they are and how rewarding they can be for players of all experience levels, but especially for middle-aged newcomers like us. In this episode, we're diving into the styles of game, the many ways you can approach role-playing games, each offering a unique flavour of adventure, and we'll be breaking the most popular styles down and discussing what makes each one tick. Given some options, you might be able to then choose the right table for you, or at the very least, you'll be prepared for anything and ready to roll. Okay, introducing the RPG Blokes. And my name is Mark, and I ought to introduce myself. I often forget. So we'll start with Stephen. The most versatile amongst us is a little like a chess player. He has been known to DM to more than one table at once.
As in different games?
Yeah, at the same time, literally, like a chess player would move between chessboards.
True. Yeah, I'm not sure I've won any of the games, but yeah.
Okay, and John, the most narcoleptic amongst us, who has been known to fall asleep during the occasional session.
I'm old.
Well, it's a bit awkward, especially if he's your DM.
Not done that yet.
No.
But yeah.
Barry, who sometimes turns up to the table a little wound up after work and sees a good fight early on as quite therapeutic, in-game of course. But DM beware, hide those important NPCs until after the bloodbath. Many an important plot hook has been lost that way.
Are you saying I kill indiscriminately? Because it's accurate.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, just don't put anybody important in your way within the first 20 minutes of a session.
And you've nailed it, especially if I've had a shit day at work.
Yeah,
I just put someone in front of me, I'll slit their throat in a heartbeat.
Well, Peter Tankard was more your style.
Oh, I enjoyed that so much.
Today's podcast is about talking about the different styles of game that you're almost certainly going to be playing one of these styles of game. If you're given a choice between different tables or different games, then these are the kind of questions you should be asking. What style is it amongst these five? We're going to run through these five styles and discuss them. Each of these does warrant far more discussion, don't get me wrong, but we're trying to just give you a sort of a crash course in what you're most likely to be experiencing and being confronted with initially as you come to play. And then if you're given a choice, you can make that, or if you're not, you can kind of assess whether this group or this table is right for you. So what I'll do is I'll just run through them in turn. The first one is a sandbox and character-driven play. Players enjoy freedom in an open world, shaping the story through their choices, backstories, and relationships. This style emphasizes agency, immersion, and collaborative storytelling. Now, we get quite a lot of games like this up at our community. A lot of DMs do prefer this style of play. I think they see it as a slightly easier maybe to prep for, or have little prep in respect of otherwise reading a complex scenario. So these games are very, very common. I'm going to ask John first because it's the style of play that you like to DM yourself. Give us a little bit of insight into it and what kind of player you think might enjoy playing this style of game.
Well, people that like exploration or not to be bound by a particular narrative. The nature of the game is there is usually a storyline behind it. I've been in a couple of games where we've had no reason to be there and we've just been wandering around doing random encounters. That does not work. You've got to have some backstory or an in-character reason to be in that part of the world. You don't need as much direct prep if you're reffing it, but you've got to be familiar with the material. You've got it helps if you love the thing yourself rather than just cold study.
So you would expect, and most players would expect, the DM has a pretty good wide knowledge. As you've discussed in the past, Stephen, about sandbox and knowing your sandbox. This is crucial, isn't it, to make that kind of game work?
Absolutely. And you end up like a Build-A-Bear campaign. It's
yeah,
as you go along.
So from a player point of view, Barry, how attractive would you find that? These kind of games are very much more laid back when you play them. So the DM sits back and reacts to what the player does and it drifts very slowly, it meanders, it makes its way in directions that are very difficult to predict. How would you find a game like that?
I would find a game that was exclusively like that quite challenging. I think a good DM will have elements of sandbox in parts of their games. I think you go through stages where you are, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, where you are sandboxing for a little while, but then when you reach a location, it changes and becomes much more linear. One of the ones that really struck me as working really well was the Tomb of Annihilation. So that's pretty much sandbox until you get to specific locations, and then it literally turns into a dungeon crawler.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that change every time as well. It's like, it was one of the things I think that's one of the things that keeps you engaged with a campaign, is if it does, fulfill different styles of game. Obviously, some systems lend themselves to certain things better. If the game has points where it kind of changes up into something else, that certainly is something that helps keep me engaged.
So a variety there, that certainly crosses over the sandbox. I agree. I like, as a DM, when you hit a little moment where a sandbox occurs. It might be within a room or an inn, or it might be, like you say, there in the jungle. But too much of a good thing, would you say?
Now I've been playing for long enough and I know enough the people at our society. If I were to play a sandbox game, I would be very particular about the players that I chose to play that with.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't be interested in having 45-minute conversations about a decision. Listen, I've got no problem with other people wanting to play like that, but that's not the kind of game that I want to be in. Especially if you're only playing for 3 hours.
And that does happen, doesn't it, Stephen? You find within pure sandbox environments.
Yeah, I suppose if you give everyone that sort of absolute freedom of choice, and potentially if you as a DM, if you've gone to the sort of like extremes of not being a very open sandbox, as you've prepared nothing, you've just given them a general idea and you're waiting for them. So you would have to wait 45 minutes for their idea because you have nothing to give them to push them along. So my idea of a sandbox more is there is a box, there are walls to it, and there are toys that are being put into this sandbox, and it's your job as a DM to get over the sandbox to the players so they then can make quicker decisions. So if they're having to invent things in their heads to say, okay, I want to go to this area, and then you're having to think about it on the fly, it can take 45 minutes for things to resolve.
And so for what Barry said about he'd want to be with a certain type of player or group of players that would suit those kind of games, he's absolutely right, isn't it? Because if you have players that don't get that don't want to push a narrative, that are quite happy to do very mundane things within that sandbox environment, and we've had that, haven't we? And we've seen it.
We have, yeah. Someone, I think, was a gem crafter, wasn't he? And we, as the rest of us, wanted to do sort of like dungeon bashing stuff in the sandbox, and he wanted to craft gems.
Yeah. What about the Aftermath game? That turned into...
the Aftermath, yeah. That was the DM. I think he just had an idea of a location, and then was just letting us open doors for about 10 weeks.
And it was an end of the world. Well, not just open and dismantling doors.
Yeah, well, that was me. One of the players decided to collect metal by dismantling all the boxes and doors and stuff. So yeah, it was fairly tedious. Yeah, that was a sandbox with nothing in it. So you need to fill your sandbox with toys, so we say, for the players to interact with.
And that reminds me, John, about something you described about in a previous podcast episode about just placing things in the environment to help players engage. You're throwing things in like little fish, and you're waiting for which one that they kind of choose and pull out of the water, and you just go with that.
You've got to have the familiarity with the world. In my Warhammer one fairly recently, they went from Nuln to Altdorf. It wasn't a wrong decision by any stretch of the imagination. I was not expecting it. Delay session, travel encounters, little bits of random stuff to fill that out. So I had
you weren't a master of your sandbox then?
I wasn't. I hadn't read up on Altdorf anywhere near as much as I'd like, so I'd only encountered it as a player. I'm fairly familiar with Nuln, Marienburg.
Check out RPG Blokes Plus. It's our premium service where we give you the opportunity to help pay our bills. And we guarantee you an episode every week, exclusive live plays and interviews. Now that's got to be worth £3 of anyone's money.
RPG Blokes Plus. Regular episodes for a regular you.
It's difficult, right? So that happened. That's a major kind of fail in a way as a DM, that you had to call a session to an end because they went so far off the sandbox.
No, I didn't call it to an end.
No.
It's just it changed it to stuff for them to do on the way, but it was kind of outside the plot.
So Barry, from a player's point of view, that kind of insight into the fact that a DM kind of almost then is having to wing it, does that appeal to you as a player? I just want to round this off, I think, from a player's perspective, and what kind of person might enjoy that experience compared to some of the others we're going to put on offer here.
I think if it's obvious that your DM is winging it, that might somehow detract from it. I think, again, your DM needs to be confident. I think if they're winging it, I'd rather not know they were winging it. I want them to keep that anxiety to themselves, thank you very much, because they're presenting me with a story. They're the governor.
I think it is one of the hardest games to play and also to do DM, but I think it can also sandbox. You can have sandbox mystery games, you can have sandbox any game. So sandbox kind of fits to any other genre as well.
I mean, sandbox is more of a mechanism than a genre, right? You could have a gothic horror sandbox. You could have a Star Wars
so it
sandbox.
can be applied.
You could have it can be, absolutely.
Hack and slash.
When it works, it's wonderful. It's massively immersive. You feel as if you're creating the narrative, and like no other game can give you that feeling.
Yeah, if you get it right, it's great. Yeah.
It is really great. And like those little moments where sandbox dynamically occur, I don't rush through those. I like to draw those parts out, and nobody objects to that ever. I just think maybe too much of a good thing. It's kind of difficult to maintain, but if you can find a DM that can do that, and it's the genre you like to play, fantastic. I suggest you go for it. So the second option you may have is the dungeon crawl hack and slash. So action-packed gameplay focused on battling enemies, solving traps, and hoarding treasures. Dungeon crawls offer a more structural challenge, while hack and slash emphasizes fast-paced combat and simplicity. I think actually I'll go to Barry on this one, because you've already stated that this is probably your most favourite style of role-playing. This is the part of the game that you enjoy the most.
It was certainly the part of the game that I was able to engage with the quickest, easiest, most readily when I started. There was less kind of character role play, and it was more about your skills and attributes. I think it's a great place to start. I know some systems lend themselves more to being, role play heavy or combat heavy and stuff like that, but a well-rounded campaign should have a bit of everything in it.
Yeah, but there would be some scenarios that are very heavily in this direction.
Well, I think Dungeons & Dragons has a bit of everything, but certainly its core audience is the hack and slash dungeon crawl.
Clues in the name.
Exactly, and with dragons in it as well.
Yeah.
Hack and slash dungeon crawls, I think, are great. I mean, I love them personally when I first started playing. I would argue that they're the ultimate sandbox, because you have this wide area that you can do anything and go anywhere in. And it's good for a DM. It's like throwing a ball against a wall. You'll get something back with a hack and slash.
But it's not a character-driven sandbox.
Well, it is, because everyone has their motivations. Oh, I want treasure. I'm going to scout ahead. There are motivations in there. They're not as broad. I think people would enjoy that style.
Sure, it's a massively enjoyable way of playing the game. But I just think people that are kind of buying into the sandbox and character-driven players we've described, which is quite often how it is, would find this to be completely opposite and welcome relief in some respects.
It's also the time that you'll have your most weirdly obsessive interest in the door.
Oh yeah.
How many ways can you approach a door?
There is a door, and you're like, everyone's straight right looking for, and you're like, has anyone tried opening it?
And the one time you don't check for traps is the time you get blown up by it as well.
Whereas the other times you check, you get a success, and there's nothing.
Yeah, always the way, isn't it? Yeah, but the door and dungeon crawls are brilliant for that. I fell out of love with D&D for a while, and I came back to play it with the 5th edition. And it was a dungeon crawl that attracted me back to it, because it just took me back to basics. And I enjoyed thinking, which direction do I want to go? Yeah, there's a door, so go through it. Let's fight the creature on the other side. Let's take the treasure. And I kind of reconnected with D&D that way. And it's pretty old school play, but it's
easier for newcomers, definitely, to get involved in that kind of game, because it's not a lot of thinking about your character's motivations as such, we were saying, but it's more of just instinctive kind of play. That kind of, there's always something in front of you to conquer or to get over to an end goal. It's simplified the game, and it's enjoyable. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, John, what's your
some that have doubled down on that? So there's essentially a board game, Hero Quest. I have many hours playing. That is literally all it is, though. It's a nice little dungeon crawl. It's no role play. There's nothing like that. You just go in. It does introduce cooperative play, same as Zombicide. Similar thing. You've got nice, interesting characters.
It almost boils down to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the thing, stuff like Zombicide, you actually want a bit of role play to creep in, but it's not needed. You can just enjoy that game for what it is. But eventually, as a player, you're going to want to experience other things, and that's where the role-playing comes in. What was the big mega dungeon in D&D? The Undermountain.
A campaign like that is fantastic for taking you out of that environment and placing you back into like a sandbox city, for instance. You'd have the yawning portal and...
Yeah, I'd certainly say if you're trying to cross over sandbox city with dungeons, sometimes dungeons can take a long time to get through. And by the time you've come out of it, you've kind of forgotten the plot of the city. So that's
you found that?
Yeah, I found that because I'd mixed sort of the Waterdeep City with the dungeon crawl, but the dungeon crawl sometimes can take months to get through, and people have forgotten the plot why they're in the city in the first place. Because you can get stuck in a dungeon for a long time looking at doors.
So the city is just a place to spend your money.
So you've got to, exactly. So the city at that point has to be like a background area that kind of just maybe you do a plot, but you can't mix match too quickly.
Yeah. So you at least want a target, a reason for doing these dungeon things. Once you've got that, then you've got a reason for why dungeons are in the first place. So Undermountain came with a backstory.
So Barry. So we've talked about Zombicide, and you came from Zombicide into Dungeons and Dragons, and Zombicide being a cooperative board game. What differences did you find between the two? They can be very similar, right? On a basic dungeon crawl level.
So I think they are very similar in that regard. You're using miniatures, you're rolling dice. I think the parallels are absolutely obvious. With Zombicide, even though you're playing like a character, you don't have to give any thought to motivations, traits, allegiances. None of that stuff's there.
For people listening to this that are coming from a tabletop gaming point of view, from playing games like Zombicide and other tabletop games, maybe the more collaborative types, and looking at other people playing Dungeons and Dragons like you did, that gap is not as big as what you might imagine, would you say? Or
like I say, when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, there was some self-conscious stuff, some anxiety stuff, which I didn't have any of that with Zombicide, because you're not really with, like a exclusively combat-based game. You're not kind of putting yourself out there in any way. How I felt about it and my anxiety levels and self-consciousness, there was quite a big jump. But in terms of the actual mechanics and stuff like that, not that big a jump.
And that jump, that distance between being on that side of the hobby to this, the English channel of the jump is going into a dungeon crawl or into a hack and slash.
I agree completely. I think my first campaign was Out of the Abyss. Yeah, the jump isn't that big. Take it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good hop across, especially games like Zombicide, and there's lots of those sort of types of games out now that are kind of very, very similar or adjacent. It used to be kind of Hero Quest, like we were saying, that sort of game that you would hop across to D&D.
But it's still the mechanics, the resource management, the advancing the levels.
Yeah.
You're likely to play a dungeon crawler with a map with figures on them.
Absolutely,
with the miniatures.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you wouldn't be doing it correctly otherwise. But especially large scale dungeon. If the whole point of the game is to play the dungeon, then certainly on battle balls is definitely the way to go. If you just want to breeze through the dungeon as part of a narrative, not maybe necessary. But yeah, as if your focus, like Undermountain game, is just about the dungeon, then go for it.
John, so if you were playing a dungeon crawl hack and slash and it only had those elements to it, would you be happy with
I'm kind of doing that on Tuesday at the moment. Again, it went from sandbox while the DM took the time to read up. He started to read up, and that's great. And we've now got a bit of a focus and a reason for being there. We all prefer it. The wandering around doing random encounters, it kind of blows really hard when once you've discovered the role play side of things. You want to identify with your character, you want to experience things. You don't just want to turn up, beat the snot out of stuff, wait for healing.
So if you want that side of the game, just be careful and ask, what type of game is this? It's a dungeon crawl, this is what we're doing, it's not much else. Then bear in mind that you won't get some of the other experiences and things that we've been talking about. But
I know when I started off, I loved a dungeon crawl. That's what I was all about. And role playing actually scared me. I wasn't happy in me, or experiencing things through a character is a nice little safety filter. If you're, we didn't have social anxiety when I was a kid. I was just shy.
Right. So moving on to the next one, it's survival and horror. So players face constant danger, limited resources, and supernatural or psychological threats. This style thrives on tension, tough choices, and the struggle to overcome both external dangers and inner fears. And I like this myself. I like the grim and perilous, which is trademark Games Workshop perhaps, but it's become a term that's very synonymous with this survival horror, where you're sort of underpowered, both socially and physically, and the battle is there to choose your fights and to figure out the best way through. You've already spoken about Call of Cthulhu, Barry. Would you like to talk about your experience playing that game, because you really enjoyed it? Right?
And I was surprised by how much I really enjoyed it, because it's like combat is fucking deadly, like pretty much to be avoided whenever you can. It's one of the weaknesses, isn't quite the right word, but it's one of the things about D&D. It's like you recover from combat in a heartbeat. And actually, that isn't particularly realistic. And if you are going to be going for something that's horror survival based, then yes, there absolutely has to be jeopardy at every turn. And you know, just getting punched in the face can, you know, actually be pretty serious for your character, like it can in real life, you know. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I also I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the like research element. We were going to libraries and you know, trying to build relationships with people so that we could get information, and you know, it's not the sort of game that I would choose to be playing constantly, but as something different to what I'm used to doing, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and was kind of taken aback by how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah, character death is a real possibility here, right? In fact, you know, we play a proper game of Call of Cthulhu, or any of these real survival horror games, then
yeah, Cthulhu is a cross definitely between survival horror and the next one we're going to talk about, mystery and investigation. Is a cross, because there are survival horror games that don't have the mystery in it. Like you don't necessarily have to be underpowered. You could be incredibly high powered, but still be in a horror and survival game. As in, I was just quite about the Alien game that we played. Everyone played quite high powered creatures.
But we're high powered, but we were still
you're against things that are more high powered than you, and that's the thing. That's what kind of it gives you the kind of the creeps when it comes down to it, that yeah, you could die at any moment.
But when I played it, I actually, for strange reason, wanted to be killed by an alien, because I'd seen it on TV so much and on the films. I'm thinking, oh, let's just come and bite my head off and take me off into the air. And I got my kicks that way, but you shouldn't really. You really, to immerse yourself in this genre, yeah, it's all about wanting to survive.
I've got a love-hate relationship with the horror games, really. I love DMing them when I do playing them, because I end up sort of being killed, especially when you DM them. I just die in the first kind of half hour, and my character seems to be some sort of vessel for the evil person trying to infiltrate the party. But yeah,
it's unrelenting.
If the cap fits.
I can't survive as a player survival horrors. I'm poor at them.
It's slow character development. It's high risk of death. You know, if you feel it's an us versus them thing with the DM, then this is going to bring out that paranoia far more than any other system you've ever played.
Yeah, I think the DM has to be on top of you in that respect, to give the sort of like survival horror vibe to it. So give that.
So this is interesting, isn't it? So all of these style of games, systems live and die by their mechanics, not just their mood. You know, you can have the most amazing mood and settings, and if the mechanics are clunky and stuff like that, for me, that can spoil it. I really enjoyed the mechanics of the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay that we played. I just thought they absolutely nailed it in terms of the character development, how you spend your XP. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And again, for me, that's one of the things that's missing from D&D.
I'd describe Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay as a survival horror game.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. But I really love the way that you spent your XP every week, and there were a lot of ways to spend it. It was much less linear, and I think as a result, your character felt more fleshed out, because you were making more conscious choices every week about what direction is this guy going in.
Yeah, and if you're playing this genre, you're less likely to be playing Dungeons and Dragons. There are some, we've got Ravenloft as the setting, but it lacks that survival horror real feel, because you don't have a great chance of dying in Dungeons and Dragons.
When we played that, it was less gothic horror, more Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I think that's what maybe.
But you're talking about 5th edition.
Yeah,
that was
because it was originally a 2nd edition game, and it was very much a survival horror in 2nd edition.
Yeah,
Ravenloft was hugely
different
survival
character
horror.
every session.
We want people to know what they might not like about these different genres as well, so then they can home in on the one that suits them better.
Like, dying's good fun. You know, and from a role, don't get so attached to a character that, like, you are going to compromise the fun and the role play just to make sure that they survive. Be prepared to kill that guy if that's the end of it.
If he gets a nice heroic death, I think. Because sometimes dying to a random encounter, there's nothing worse. This was just random.
So Yeah, I quite like. I mean, obviously, everyone likes going out in a blaze of glory, but I also quite like going out in a blaze of stupidity.
Yeah, that's cool, but that's a blaze of something.
Yeah,
there is a risk that you have that feeling in survival horror that you might just think, oh, everything I've gone through, and this thing has just done me, and I
think
really
good survival horror games kind of make your death fun. They do, and they make it make sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Some of the more modern ones that you do like you die into an alien is fun, isn't it? You can get dragged up into the pipe and dragged away. But sometimes dying in survival horror that's just nothing, didn't mean anything, then that could be an issue for people.
You've got to choose to die or set yourself up to fail to have that as an enjoyable part of the narrative.
And I think more than any other game type, you have to really trust your DM and give yourself over to his judgment. And if you don't get on with your DM, do not play his survival horror game.
And it was, I know we're not playing survival horror at the moment, but it was something that was said to me, last week. My DM just tipped me the wink, like, just so you know, if you do this, it's probably the end of your character. Is that where you want to go with this? And actually, on this occasion, and many times I said, yep, that's his natural story arc. But on this occasion, I was like, no, actually, it's not where I want. So like you say, a good DM will give you a little bit of a wink or a nod. It's not cheating. It's not, spoiling the story. They're just like, I just want to be sure that you understand the magnitude of what you're doing. And I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. I hope that's given you a little insight into that genre and style of play. And it's not one of the most common styles of play, but if you choose a particular game system, you'll play it as a default. So moving on to the fourth out of 5 is the mystery and investigation. And as Stephen's pointed out, we've already covered a little bit this. The survival horror does cross over with this quite a bit.
With Cthulhu, for sure, that they take elements of both and marry it together,
So focused on role-playing, NPC interactions and creative problem-solving. Dice rolls are minimal, with strategy and exploration driving the story. Combat is rare but impactful, rewarding careful planning and immersion. This is the thinking man's game, I guess, or the thinking person's game.
So far, for me, pretty much every system or campaign that I've played has had elements of investigation and exploration. Sometimes it's as simple as you are, walking around a town looking for a thing. Other times it can be you are trying literally to discover other people's, other characters' sort of drive and motivations. It can be really, don't rule out these kind of more cerebral kind of games. They are really good fun, and it's not what I'd necessarily want to be doing every single solitary week.
Yeah, because the dice don't come into play very often, because you can't say, well, make a dice roll, you solve the mystery. You as players are having to kind of really ultra engage in the narrative and what's going on.
Yeah, it depends on the system you're playing with it. I think we have discussed independently about a Dungeons and Dragons kind of investigation can be completely different to a Call of Cthulhu investigation. And Barry's right. You can have investigations that are quite, sort of like just not particularly that complicated. That just gets you through a part of a scenario. Or you can get some of the more kind of old school Call of Cthulhu scenarios that you have to read reams of handouts just to get your next clue, and if you miss something in the handout, then you're off plot, and then suddenly you're failing. So
don't feel so scared about a D&D mystery scenario. That might not be as...
No, I wouldn't have thought it would be as in-depth, because some of the old Call of Cthulhu scenarios are just mind-boggling. That's what you have to place together, really. Is you have to be kind of like a detective inspector sometimes in real life to get through some of these, and they're really strict on it. And I love it, but it's a totally different styles of game. There are extremes within the investigation genre. I think Warhammer, as I was going to say before, is something that kind of hits a middle ground between a D&D and a Call of Cthulhu. That's what they aim for. In fact, when they come out with the game, they stated they were the midpoint between Cthulhu and D&D, and I think they've hit both those things. You get combat, and you get like a fairly moderate, decent investigation.
Yeah, John, you like to introduce mystery into every game that you play, but you and I share the love of one particular scenario. I think Dead Ringer it's called. It's a
fucking beautiful,
it's an independently written Warhammer scenario, and it's quite short, but it's a brilliant mystery game. And I think those kind of games work as shorter games. So I wouldn't want to be involved in something that goes on for too much and is bogged down with research. And going to the library and Call of Cthulhu is cool. It's the iconic thing to do within that game. And it obviously is great because you picked up on how enjoyable that is, but you wouldn't want too much of that.
No, and like I said, it's not the kind of game that I'd want to play week in, week out.
Yeah.
But as for me, as a departure, as a break, as a bit of a change, I think they're absolutely perfect for that. Shortish sessions. When you said that Warhammer, when they pitched themselves as being between Cthulhu and it kind of makes sense to me now how I enjoyed it so much, because it was like, it does seem to have taken the best bits of that and the best bits of that. So maybe I'd consider doing something longer with Warhammer than I would with Cthulhu. I really, really loved the Warhammer. Sorry, I'm going to go off topic. So one of the things that I absolutely loved about Warhammer was that pretty much every role is opposed, and I particularly enjoyed that in combat because it added an element of realism for me. Speaking of someone who has thrown the occasional punch, like you can throw what is the best punch you've ever thrown, but if your opponent sees it coming, sometimes they only need to move their head 2 inches, and it's the difference between ouch and unconscious. And I really like the way that, I've rolled pretty well. I've got X levels of success, but then they've got one more level of success than you. So you've done your bit, but they've done something to scupper you. And I thought that was a really interesting dynamic, especially coming from exclusively playing D&D, where it was like, I've hit your armor class. I've hit you. Yeah. Because that's not how fights work.
You can't resist, so you're just soaking things up that are being applied to you. And I think it's fair to bring in things like that, because if you are exploring other genres, and where D&D's strength is not particularly mystery games, then you're going to be encountering new systems and discovering new ways
mechanics.
of play, new mechanics.
So
these different genres are gateways into different systems. We are going to, in a future podcast, talk about other systems that you might like to play and your choices that you may have to make there. So moving on to the last part of this podcast, we're going to talk about epic campaigns. And we've already been saying that a lot of these cross over to create what might be the perfect system for you. And then the scenario and the campaign will dictate what that mix is, and with the DM's own slant on it as well. But epic campaigns, they're the ones that really you're most likely to be brought into play, especially with Dungeons & Dragons. So players embark on a long-term adventure, rising from novices to legendary heroes, and their guided narratives feature clear goals, massive stakes, and a mix of combat, diplomacy, exploration, and they offer unforgettable progression. So this is what D&D is attempting to achieve primarily.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say they are the king of the epic campaign. I'm thinking, because they don't entirely focus on one thing, especially their pre-written kind of hardback releases from 5th edition have all been really pretty good quality, long-running campaigns where you do go from first level to 20th in some instances. It's the whole breadth of the game, and they sort of introduce the different elements of the role-playing game, from dungeon crawls to investigation to diplomacy to everything, really. You will get the full breadth of a role-playing game in those, for sure.
And there was
strength,
They always seem to end with a bit of a dungeon crawl as well,
don't
they?
As described before, it's best to end with the dungeon crawl, otherwise people forget where they were going. So I think they're quite clever there. That usually the dungeon happens at the end, so you don't really have to go back to a plot. It's just there, it's done, and then you pick up your end goals.
Yeah, so D&D does this is so well. And
but if you said to me, listen, you can only play one system for the rest of your life, it would be D&D. I'm not saying it's the best, but it's certainly the one that I feel like I'm most suited to. The library, the resources is huge. I think, I don't think you'd ever run out of scenarios to play. I think you can always find someone that will DM it. I don't want to make it sound like just being an advert for D&D. It is, at the very least, it's a really good place to start.
Yeah. And most people will start there. I think it's a great question, actually. If you could only play one system for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
And for me, it would be D&D.
So I'm going to ask that question of the other RPG blokes. John, one system for the rest of your life. Come on, you can do it.
Play or ref?
I suppose you can choose whether you're a player or do both.
You can no. You can
That's
only engage with one system for the rest of your life, either as a player or as a DM.
But there's a cheat code, I suppose, World of Darkness, because
that's a cheat. That is a cheat, because that's more than one system.
Quite a few lines. I mean, Earthdawn's got its. I'd probably say Shadowrun.
Right.
But
and what style of play is that? What genre would you
Oh, it covers the lot because the world building is so good. You can go anywhere.
Okay, that was tough for you, I could tell. So,
Yeah.
same.
Feel dirty.
Yeah, it is a tough question because I think variety is the spice of the hobby. But it'd have to be D&D, yeah, for many reasons because it is quite a huge variety of stuff you can do in it. And they're continuing to support it, whereas other games that you've just described don't get a huge amount of support.
Yeah.
And it's bound to evolve, better or for worse, but it will be around and it will be evolving. So if I had to pick one, that would be it.
For me, it is a close call, but I go with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. That's my favourite. But D&D is bloody close. I don't know. That's a really tough decision. But yeah.
Well, unfortunately, it's a hypothetical.
Yeah.
You carry on playing your indie guys games, enjoy it, embrace, do what you love.
So I did want to. That's a great question to end with, but I've got another question to ask each of you before we end this podcast. Out of those different styles that we described, if you had to choose an adventure, a scenario that was fixed on one of them and was predominantly that style, which one would you choose? And I'll go around the table in the opposite direction this time.
I've just said I like the variety of D&D, but it's if I had to choose one of those styles.
Yeah, because D&D can be any of them.
Exactly,
as well.
That's what I like about it. I've discovered I like variety, but if I had to pick one of them, I love DMing horror games.
Yeah, okay. So in D&D, that would be Ravenloft primarily.
Yeah, they're my favourite style of game to DM. Yeah, maybe not to play.
Okay.
But definitely DM.
Yeah, I think we determined that. I think I agree as well. I never saw it from that perspective. Would I want to play my own horror game? Well, John, what's your choice out of those five?
It's got to be sandbox.
Okay. Barry?
It's the epic adventure, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love an epic adventure. And I think, again, we've all, touched on, D&D does a bit of all of this.
Yeah.
Or at least it can do.
It does. The best. But then again, I might be a bit of a contradiction for me because I've chosen Warhammer as the system I would want to devote my life to. But I'd also choose an epic adventure as the style of play I'd like the best.
Yeah.
I think it does work well in Warhammer too.
Just saying, you cheating there, you're picking more than one thing, but okay.
No.
I'm just checking. I've got to
Listen
police
back.
you. I'm policing you. Who is?
Listen back. If only this was recorded.
I'll check it.
Okay. Right. Well, I think we're done actually. So everybody has hopefully got a good idea of the different styles of game that you may encounter and given a choice which one you'd prefer to play.
On that note, so let's
Slice and dice.